There's a difficult truth we have to face if we're serious about addressing the crisis of isolation and violence, and that is that some men idolize the unforgivable. It's not an easy truth to sit with. It's tempting to dismiss it or to other it or just say they're monsters. But I think when we do that, we miss something crucial. And that's the fact that martyrdom in the Incel community and beyond isn't really born from a place of pure evil, but it's born from a place of deep, festering pain. And to understand why, we have to look beyond the surface, because beneath the surface is this terrible hunger, a hunger to be seen, to be acknowledged, to actually matter. And in many cases, these are men who've spent their lives feeling invisible, overlooked by their peers, excluded from romantic and social opportunities, and left behind by a society that often equates male worth with external success, like money or attractiveness or dominance. And when they look around, they see this world that seems to tell them over and over again, you don't count. And when someone like Elliot Rodger or Alec Manassian explodes onto the public stage, not because of who they are, but because of what they did, suddenly the world notices, right? Suddenly they've gotten attention. Suddenly someone who lived in invisibility is the subject of headlines and news cycles and documentaries. Suddenly they are seen. And for those lost in the shadows still, it sends this dangerous, devastating message that maybe this is what it takes, right? I mean, not all who idolize these figures will act. Most won't, but even the act of glorification is quite telling. It's a desperate attempt, if you will, to reclaim some sense of agency, some illusion of power in a world that has felt overwhelmingly powerless. And this is not an excuse. This is an attempt of explanation, an understanding that this is the essential aspect that we need to understand if we want to change the outcome. Because if we refuse to understand it, we in essence leave the soil untouched where the next act of violence can potentially grow. So we have to ask, what makes someone hungry for validation that they would latch onto infamy as if it were glory? See, at the core, it's a relational wound. I mean, humans are wired for connection. We are born needing to be seen, needing to be known and valued. And when those needs are unmet, when the mirror of other people's eyes reflects back nothing but indifference or disgust, it distorts the way that we even see ourselves. And for many in the incel community, that distortion begins really early, through bullying perhaps, or social exclusion, or romantic rejection, family dynamics where emotional validation was scarce or absent, and layer upon layer of experiences that whisper, you are unwanted. And by the time these young men find incel forums, they're already primed for the narrative that explains their pain. You are not at fault, they say. The world is against you. Women are to blame, and society is rigged. And perhaps the most dangerous of all, there's no way out except through destruction. And this last part is the true poison. It's the black pill ideology at its most fatalistic. It tells the already isolated man that hope is for fools, that the only thing left is rage, and if properly directed, that can finally get him the recognition that he's been denied all this time. But recognition without connection is a hollow victory. Being known for harm is not the same thing as being known for who you are. It's a counterfeit form of intimacy, isn't it? A shadow version of belonging. See, true belonging requires integrity. It requires risking vulnerability. It requires believing that you have inherent worth without needing to shock or hurt others to prove it. But when the world has convinced you otherwise, the path toward integrity and intimacy can feel impossibly far away. So instead, some will turn to martyrdom. They convince themselves that their pain entitles them to inflict pain on others. That by becoming a symbol, they will transcend the insignificance that they fear currently. And yet, all martyrdom brought through violence leaves behind devastation. Not honor, not belonging, not even healing. If anything, it deepens the wound both for the world and for the community that continues to venerate the unforgivable. So this is why the cycle persists. You see, isolation breeds resentments, and resentment seeks validation, and validation in the absence of healthier options sometimes takes the form of glorifying destruction. And so the question we have to ask is not just how do we stop the violence, but how do we offer a better way to be seen? That gets closer to the heart of the problem, I believe. The truth is, no one dreams of becoming a villain. I mean, most boys don't grow up wanting to be feared, right? They just want to be admired. They want to be loved and needed. They want what every human being wants, and that is, at the very heart of it, to belong. But when that belonging feels perpetually out of reach, the hunger curdles, and unmet hunger eventually finds an outlet, sometimes in the most twisted forms. And what makes the glorification of these violent acts so potent, especially in the incel community, is that it gives this illusion of agency. It takes years of helplessness, rejection, invisibility, and it offers this fantasy of taking control, of no longer being powerless. And yet, violence is the ultimate form of self-erasing. It's an attempt to be seen that ensures that you'll only ever be seen as the worst thing that you've done. And it hardens the very loneliness that birthed it. Whereas integrity offers a different path. Integrity says, I will not let my pain turn me into the thing that I hate. It invites the person to hold a tension between hurt and hope, to believe that even if recognition is hard to come by, it is still better earned through authenticity and courage than through devastation. And here's the catch. Integrity does not offer instant results. It doesn't promise that the world will suddenly open its arms to you. And it demands patience. It demands self-respect, even when external validation is nowhere in sight. And for someone who's been denied connection for years, patience feels like another form of abandonment. And that's where intimacy comes in. You see, intimacy is the antidote to the counterfeit that connection, that violence really tries to promise. See, true intimacy, the ability to be seen and accepted for who you really are, is what these men are really starving for. But to get there, they must first believe that it's possible. They must first dare to imagine that there is a better way to be loved that does not involve dominance or fear or a spectacle. And this is the bridge back to us. It's not by shaming, not by mockery, not by further exile, but by invitation. Invitation into the spaces where worth is not conditional, where being flawed does not mean being discarded, where masculine identity is not reduced to a conquest or control, but it's expanded to include vulnerability and empathy and relational strength. But we can't save everyone, can we? Some will refuse this invitation. Some will cling to their rage because that feels safer than risking hope. But even if a few can be reached, if even a few can be shown a different model of masculinity, a different definition of dignity perhaps, then it's worth it, isn't it? Because the alternative is this cycle that keeps churning out more pain and more violence and more loss. And we've, I think, had enough of that, haven't we? See, the most dangerous stories are the ones that we tell ourselves when no one else is listening, right? And in that loneliness of a darkened room perhaps, or in the echo chambers of these online forums, this storyline or this narrative takes root, that you have been wronged, you've been forgotten, and the only way to matter is to make them remember you. It's a story that's built on real pain, real neglect, real alienation. But it's a story that leads nowhere good. When incels idolize the unforgivable, they're not really celebrating evil. They're expressing a wish, I think, and that is, would you see me? Know that I exist, understand that I mattered, even if you never wanted me in the first place. It's a cry for recognition that's wrapped in bitterness and in rage. But recognition without love, without understanding, without even intimacy, that's not healing. It's just another kind of death. So what's the way to move forward? I think this starts by refusing to glorify the harm, but also refusing to dehumanize those who fall into the trap. It starts by recognizing that you can condemn an action without actually condemning the heart that longed for something better and got lost on the way. It starts by building communities where men are seen not for their conquests or their status, but for their courage to show up in a real, authentic way. Broken maybe, flawed definitely, but real. And it starts by teaching that dignity is not something that you earn by being feared, but instead living in alignment with your deepest values, even when the world doesn't reward that immediately. Integrity doesn't promise fame. Integrity does not guarantee that safety will be there. But together they form something that violence can never offer, and that's a life that feels whole. A life where being seen does not have to be earned through destruction. A life where worth is not a prize for those who succeed according to this world's harsh standards. A life where being human or messy or imperfect, even yearning, is enough. We cannot afford to abandon those who have already been abandoned. And we cannot afford to mock those whose greatest mistake was probably believing that they were unlovable. I think we must learn to be better mirrors, and we must reflect back the lonely and the hurting, not just the truth of their pain, but the deeper truth of their dignity. Because if we don't, someone else will. Someone else will tell them a different story. A story where martyrdom looks like the only way to be seen. A story where violence feels like the only language that often gets heard. And that's a story that has already cost us too much. The making of a martyr begins with neglect. The unmaking begins with intentional care. It begins with integrity. It begins with intimacy, right? And it begins with us. I hope you'll join me on this quest. Thanks for listening in.